For men in navy blue suits stepped out of black Escalades into the Texas dust, their polished shoes contrasting sharply with the cracked earth beneath them. The elderly janitor kneeling by the broken engine didn't look up immediately. He'd learned long ago that when expensive cars arrived unannounced, they usually brought trouble. But when the lead man removed his dark sunglasses and spoke, time folded like a piece of worn paper. Do you remember the '83 blizzard in New Jersey? For kids in a busted van. Silas Thorne's weathered hands froze on his wrench. 25 years dissolved in an instant. The smell of motor oil, the sound of desperate voices in the snow, the choice that had cost him everything he thought mattered. He'd given them his last spare parts, his brother's favor, his final shot at keeping his garage. They'd promised to come back. He'd never believed them, but here they stood, and the way they looked at him, like he was someone who mattered, made his chest tight with possibilities he'd buried decades ago. Welcome to my channel. Let's dive in. 25 years earlier, Silas Thorne was loading the last of his tools into cardboard boxes. Winter of 1983. The foreclosure notice was still taped to his garage door, red letters bleeding in the New Jersey sleet. 38 years old, a widower with a daughter he could barely afford to call, watching 20 years of Thorne Auto Repair disappear because the big chains had moved in and crushed the small shops like his. His brother had a factory job waiting in Maryland, manual labor, starting over with nothing. Silas was supposed to leave at dawn, but something kept him moving slowly, like his hands knew this was the last time they'd hold these tools in this place. That's when he heard it. Not music exactly, but the desperate rev of an engine that was never going to turn over. Then silence. Then voices, young and panicked, carried on the wind. Silas stepped outside into the bitter night. Half a mile down Route 18, hazard lights blinked like a distress signal. A van, broken down, snow starting to stick to the windshield. For silhouettes moving around it in the kind of frantic dance that meant they were running out of options. Not your problem, he told himself. You've got nothing left to give. But something about the scene, the way they kept trying to start the engine, the desperate way one of them kicked the tire, reminded him of his own younger self. The version who'd believed that hard work and good intentions were enough, before life taught him otherwise. Silas grabbed his tools and drove out to them. For young men stood around the open hood, breath visible in the freezing air, early 20s, dressed like they'd been sleeping in the van for weeks. The tall one with dark hair had the hollow look of someone who'd been living on dreams and desperation. The others, a redhead built like a linebacker, a thin guy with intense eyes, and a quiet one who kept checking his watch, all had the same expression. Time running out. Engine trouble? Silas asked, though it was obvious. The dark-haired one looked up. Yeah, been making noise for hours, then just died. We're supposed to be in New York by morning. Silas checked the engine with his flashlight. Old Chevy van, maybe 78, held together with hope and duct tape. Your timing chain snapped. This engine's not going anywhere tonight. The words hit them like a physical blow. The redhead actually staggered backward. We have to be there. We have a meeting. What kind of meeting? Something in their desperation reminded Silas of his own daughter. The way she'd sound when she called about needing money for school, trying not to cry. Record label. NR guy from Atlantic heard our demo. Only shot we've got. The dark-haired one's voice cracked. We've been touring for 2 years, sleeping in this van, playing for gas money. Borrowed 15 grand from my uncle's construction business to record that demo. If we don't get signed. He didn't finish, but Silas understood. He'd been there himself. Not with music, but with the garage, with every loan that had eventually buried him. Where you coming from? Chicago. Drove straight through. The thin one spoke up. Management company there said Atlantic was interested. Set up the meeting. This is it for us, man. We're broke, we're tired, and if we don't make this meeting, we're done. Silas did the math. It was 11 p.m. New York was 3 hours away in good weather. In the snow, with these roads, maybe 4. Even if he could fix their van right now, which he couldn't, not without parts, they'd be cutting it close. I can't fix this here, he said, but I can tow you to my garage. How much? The redhead's voice was tight. Silas looked at these 4 kids, saw the same hunger he'd once had, the same dream that life had slowly strangled out of him. His garage would be repossessed in 6 hours. His tools were already packed. He had maybe $200 to his name and a daughter who needed it more than these strangers did. Let's get you there first. We'll figure out the money later. He towed them to Thorne Auto Repair, turned on the lights one last time, pulled the van into the bay. The 4 musicians stood in his garage, cold and exhausted, while Silas assessed the real damage. Worse than he'd thought. This would take parts he didn't have and time they didn't have. I'm Cormac, the dark-haired one said. This is Vance, Soren, and Julian. The band's called Crosswind. Silas Thorne. This your first real shot? Only shot, Julian said quietly. We're already 3 months behind on rent. Vance's girlfriend left him because we can't afford to eat anywhere except gas stations. My mom thinks I've lost my mind. Silas worked through the night, knowing it was hopeless but unable to stop himself. By 3 a.m., he had the engine torn apart, the broken timing chain in pieces on his workbench. Even if the parts store opened at 7, even if he could get everything installed by noon, they'd never make an 8 a.m. meeting. That's when he made the choice that would define the rest of his life. My brother's driving through New York tomorrow morning, Silas said. Construction job upstate. If I call him now, he might pick you up, get you there by 7:30. The 4 musicians stared at him. Why would you do that? Vance asked. You don't even know us. Silas looked around his garage, at the tools he'd bought one by one, the bay where he'd fixed thousands of cars, the dreams he'd built and lost in this space. Because 20 years ago, I wanted to be a teacher, had a chance to go back to school, get my degree. But my wife got sick and we needed the money, and I chose the safe thing. Open this garage instead. He picked up the phone. You don't get many shots at what you really want. Don't waste yours. His brother answered, grumpy but willing. He'd be there at 5 a.m. The band tried to pay him with what little money they had. Silas refused. Save it. You'll need every dollar in New York. We'll pay you back, Cormac promised, gripping Silas's hand. When we make it, we're coming back here. Silas had heard that before. People always meant it when they said it, but success had a way of making the past invisible. Just don't waste the shot, he said. That's all I ask. At 5 a.m., his brother's pickup pulled up. The 4 members of Crosswind climbed into the cab and truck bed, guitars and hopes packed tight. Cormac was the last one in. Thank you for believing in us. I believe in builders, Silas replied. I stopped believing in myself. Don't make the same mistake. The truck disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, taillights fading like dying stars. Silas went back inside, spent the morning cleaning his garage one last time, making sure he left it the way he'd found it 20 years ago. He never heard from them again. 2 days later, he loaded his remaining possessions into his own truck and drove to Maryland to start over. The factory job was brutal. 12-hour shifts, minimum wage, the kind of work that ground men down instead of building them up. But it was honest work, and it paid enough to keep him afloat. After a few years, creditors stopped looking for Silas Thorne. So he let that name fade away, became Simon Torres when he moved to Texas, took a job as a night janitor at a medical clinic. Quiet work, invisible work, the kind that let a man disappear completely. He tried to reach Alara a few times over the years, but she'd moved to California for medical school, then residency, then a career he couldn't afford to be part of. The last time they'd spoken, maybe 10 years ago, she'd asked him to stop calling. Said it was too hard to hear his voice when she couldn't help him, couldn't change what their lives had become. So Silas learned to live small. Rented room, bus pass, books from the library. Sometimes, late at night when he was mopping floors at the clinic, he'd wonder whatever happened to those 4 young men. Whether they'd made their meeting, whether their big idea had worked, whether they'd changed the world like they dreamed. But he'd stopped expecting answers to questions like that long ago. Now, 25 years later, they were back, standing in the Texas dust like ghosts made flesh, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not pity, not guilt, but something else. Something that looked almost like gratitude. "Mr. Thorne," Cormac said, and hearing his real name spoken aloud after all these years hit Silas like a physical blow. "We've been looking for you for a very long time." Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. "Mr. Thorne," Cormac said, and hearing his real name spoken aloud after all these years hit Silas like a physical blow. "We've been looking for you for a very long time." Silas stood slowly, his knees protesting the movement, still gripping the wrench like an anchor to reality. "Looking for me? Why?" "Because..." Vance stepped forward, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes that looked older, but still carried that same intense focus from 1983. "Everything we have, everything we've built, started that night in your garage." The Texas sun beat down on them, creating an almost surreal tableau. 4 men in $1,000 suits standing next to a janitor in coveralls. Luxury SUVs parked beside a rusted shed. Silas felt like he was watching someone else's life unfold. "I don't understand," he said quietly. Julian, the quiet one who'd always checked his watch, pulled out a tablet and handed it to Silas. The screen showed a corporate logo, Crosswind Technologies. Below it, financial numbers that made Silas's vision blur. Revenue in the billions. Market cap that defied comprehension. "That meeting you got us to," Soren said, his voice steady but emotional. "It changed everything. Kessler didn't just fund us, he connected us with other investors, other innovators. The network protocol we developed became the foundation for what people now call the modern internet infrastructure." Silas stared at the screen, trying to process what they were telling him. "You boys? You really did it?" "We did more than make it," Cormac said. "We revolutionized how data moves across networks. Our routing algorithms are running on servers in every major city in the world. Every time someone sends an email, streams a video, makes a video call, our technology is part of what makes that possible." The wrench slipped from Silas's fingers, clattering onto the dusty ground. 25 years of wondering, of sleepless nights imagining what might have happened to those 4 desperate young men, and here was his answer. They hadn't just survived, they'd conquered. But something in their expressions told him this wasn't just a social call. "We've been looking for you since 1995, Vance continued. 12 years after that night. When the company went public, when we first made real money, the first thing we did was hire private investigators to find you. But you disappeared," Julian added. "Silas Thorne, Thorne Auto Repair. It was like you'd never existed. The garage was demolished, your forwarding address led to a dead end in Maryland. And after that, nothing." Silas felt a familiar pang of shame. "I had debts. People looking for money I couldn't pay. Sometimes a man has to become someone else to survive." "We know," Cormac said gently. "We found your brother Tom in 1998. He told us about the factory job, about you disappearing to escape creditors. But even he didn't know where you'd gone after Maryland. We spent millions," Soren said, and there was pain in his voice. "Professional investigators, skip tracers, computer searches before the internet made everything easy. We checked immigration records thinking maybe you'd left the country. We even hired genealogists to trace your family tree, thinking we could find you through relatives. Every year, Vance added, we'd expand the search. Different states, different names, different professions. We knew you were a mechanic, so we checked every auto repair shop from Maine to California. When that didn't work, we broadened it to any kind of manual labor. Silas's mind reeled. While he'd been mopping floors and changing his name, while he'd convinced himself he was forgotten and forgettable, these 4 men had been spending fortunes trying to find him. But why? You didn't owe me anything. We owed you everything, Cormac said fiercely. That night, when you gave us your last $200, when your brother drove us to New York, you didn't just help 4 strangers. You saved our lives. The meeting with Kessler almost didn't happen anyway, Julian explained. We got there at 7:45, exhausted, dirty, looking like we'd been living in a van, which we had. His secretary tried to turn us away. But something about the desperation in our eyes, the way we talked about this technology that could change everything, Kessler saw us. 15 minutes, Vance said. That's all he gave us initially. But Cormac had brought the prototype, and when we showed him what our network protocol could do, how it could route data more efficiently than anything that existed, those 15 minutes turned into 3 hours. He funded us that day, Soren continued. Not just startup money, real investment. Office space, equipment, salaries. But more than that, he connected us with other investors, other tech companies, people who understood what we were building. Silas listened, still trying to process the magnitude of what they were telling him. And you boys? You've been successful? Cormac laughed, but there was no arrogance in it. Silas, Crosswind Technologies is worth $47 billion. Our data routing protocols handle about 30% of global internet traffic. Every major tech company licenses our innovations. We're not just programmers anymore, Vance added. We're venture capitalists ourselves, investing in the next generation of innovators. We fund everything from medical research to sustainable energy to space technology. But none of it would have existed without that night, Julian said quietly. Without you believing in 4 kids with a crazy idea and no money. Silas felt tears threatening, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. You really tried to find me? Every year on December 15th, the anniversary of that blizzard, we'd meet in our boardroom and plan the next phase of the search, Soren explained. We called it Project Thorn. It became our most important annual tradition. What finally worked? Silas asked. Facial recognition, Cormac said with a slight smile. Technology we helped develop, ironically. Last year, we partnered with a security company that was implementing our networking protocols. Their system scans employment records, driver's license databases, even security camera footage from major employers. The medical clinic where you work, Vance explained, they upgraded their security system 6 months ago. New cameras, networked surveillance. When our search algorithm scanned the footage and matched it against age-progressed photos of you. You found a ghost, Silas finished. We found our foundation, Cormac corrected. Silas, there's something else you need to know. Something we've been waiting 25 years to tell you. Julian pulled out a leather portfolio and handed it to Silas. Inside were legal documents, patent filings, corporate papers, all dense with legal language Silas couldn't fully comprehend. Every major breakthrough we've made, every patent we've filed, every innovation that's generated revenue. We've listed you as a co-inventor, Vance explained. From a legal standpoint, you own 25% of everything we've created. Silas stared at the papers, the words blurring together. I don't understand. The network routing algorithm that made us billionaires, Cormac said. We developed it by thinking about how you diagnosed problems in that van. The way you looked at a broken engine and saw not just what was wrong, but how information flows through a system, how to find alternative pathways when the main route fails. Your mechanical intuition, Soren added. The way you understood that the engine block was cracked not just from the symptoms but from understanding the whole system. That became our approach to network diagnostics. We've been setting aside your share of profits since 1995, Julian said quietly. With compound interest and stock appreciation, your portion is currently valued at approximately $12 billion. The portfolio slipped from Silas's hands, papers scattering in the Texas wind. $12 billion. The number was so large it felt fictional, like something from a movie rather than his life. I can't. This isn't real, he whispered. It's real, Vance assured him. But there's more, Silas. Something even more important than money. Cormac pulled out his phone, dialed a number, then handed it to Silas. Someone wants to talk to you. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered. A voice Silas recognized despite not hearing it in over a decade. Daddy! Silas's knees buckled. He would have fallen if Soren hadn't caught his arm. Alara? Oh my God! Daddy, is it really you? Her voice was breaking, years of pain and longing compressed into those few words. I've been looking for you for so long. Baby girl, Silas managed, tears now flowing freely. I thought you didn't want to hear from me anymore. Never, Alara said fiercely. Never, Daddy. I was angry and young and stupid, and I said things I didn't mean. I've been trying to find you since I finished my residency. I hired investigators, checked databases, even put out ads in newspapers. Where have you been? Hiding, Silas admitted. Being nobody. Being ashamed. Dr. Thorne, Cormac said gently, taking the phone for a moment. We'd like to bring your father to you, if that's all right. We have a jet waiting in Dallas. Dr. Thorne, Silas asked, confused. Cormac smiled. Your daughter is Dr. Alara Thorne, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Miami General Hospital. She's one of the leading heart surgeons in the country. The phone came back to Silas. Daddy, please come. Please let me see you. I live in Miami now, and I have so much to tell you, so much to show you. I don't have anything to wear, Silas said, suddenly aware of his janitor's coveralls, his unwashed appearance, the gap between his life and hers. You have everything that matters, Alara said softly. You have love, Daddy. That's all I've ever wanted from you. The flight to Miami passed in a blur. The private jet, one of Crosswind's corporate aircraft, was larger than some apartments Silas had lived in. Cormac, Vance, Soren, and Julian spent the flight explaining their businesses, their families, their successes, but also their regrets. We each tried to find surrogates, Vance admitted. Father figures, mentors, people who reminded us of you, but it never worked. You can't replace the person who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. We all have kids now, Julian added, and we tell them about the night a mechanic in New Jersey saved their futures. They think it's a fairy tale. It is a fairy tale, Soren said quietly. The good kind, where kindness wins. Miami General Hospital was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, the kind of place Silas had only seen from the outside. But as they walked through the corridors, he felt a strange sense of familiarity. This was where his daughter worked, where she saved lives, where she'd built the kind of career he'd once dreamed of. The elevator rose to the 14th floor, and then they were walking down a hallway lined with awards and commendations. Dr. Alara Thorne's name appeared on plaques, certificates, photographs with dignitaries and fellow physicians. And then she was there. Alara had her mother's eyes but her father's stubborn chin, her mother's grace but her father's steady hands. She wore surgical scrubs and had her hair pulled back, and when she saw Silas, 25 years collapsed into nothing. Daddy! They held each other in that hospital hallway, both of them crying, both of them trying to apologize for words spoken in anger decades ago, both of them realizing that some bonds can't be broken by time or distance or pride. "I'm so proud of you," Silas whispered into her hair. "A doctor, a surgeon, everything your mama dreamed you'd become." "I became what you taught me to become," Ilara replied. "Someone who fixes broken things. Someone who doesn't give up on people." Over dinner that night, at Ilara's home, a beautiful house overlooking Biscayne Bay, the full story came out. Ilara had indeed been looking for her father since finishing medical school. She'd hired investigators, placed ads, even contacted veterans organizations thinking he might have sought help through the VA. "The scholarship that paid for medical school," she said, looking directly at Cormac. "That was you, wasn't it?" Cormac nodded. "The Thorne Foundation for Medical Education. We started it in 1996, specifically to cover your expenses. We couldn't find your father, but we could make sure his daughter achieved her dreams." "You've been watching over me for decades," Ilara said, wonder in her voice. "Your father saved our lives," Vance said simply. "We wanted to save yours too, in whatever small way we could. But the biggest surprise was yet to come." 3 days later, they flew to North Dakota, to a plot of land outside Bismarck that had been farmland just months before. Now it was a construction site, and the sign at the entrance read, "Thorne Vocational Institute, where dreams are built." "What is this?" Silas asked as they walked among the construction crews, the steel frameworks rising like mechanical cathedrals. "Your legacy," Julian explained. "A school that teaches practical skills to people who need second chances. Automotive repair, computer programming, welding, electrical work, medical technician training. We've endowed it with $500 million, Soren added. Enough to provide free education to thousands of students. Forever." "But why here?" Silas asked. "Because this is where it all started," Cormac said. "Not the geographic location, but the idea. That night in 1983, when you chose to help 4 strangers instead of protecting yourself, you proved something important. That the most valuable investment you can make is in human potential. We want you to run it," Vance said. "Not as a figurehead, but as the heart of the operation. Teaching young people not just skills, but the value of helping others, of believing in dreams even when they seem impossible." Silas looked around at the construction, at the buildings that would house workshops and classrooms, at the dormitories that would shelter students who had nowhere else to go. "I don't know anything about running a school," he protested. "You know the most important thing," Ilara said, taking his arm. "You know how to see potential in people when they can't see it in themselves." 6 months later, Silas Thorne stood before the first graduating class of Thorne Vocational Institute. 57 students, ranging in age from 18 to 64, representing every background imaginable. Single mothers learning computer programming. Ex-convicts becoming certified welders. Veterans training as medical technicians. Teenagers from broken homes discovering they had gifts for automotive repair. Cormac, Vance, Soren, and Julian sat in the front row. All of them now in their early 50s, but still carrying themselves with the energy of the young men who'd once been stranded in a snowstorm. Ilara sat beside them, having taken a leave of absence from her surgical practice to help develop the medical technician program. 25 years ago, Silas began, his voice carrying across the auditorium. "For young men taught me something important. They showed me that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have consequences we never imagine." He looked out at the graduates, at faces that reminded him of his own younger self, at people who'd been given a second chance to build something meaningful. "But today, you've taught me something even more important. You've shown me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. That dreams deferred are not dreams denied. that the best investment we can make is not in stocks or bonds or real estate, but in each other. The applause was thunderous, but what moved Silas most were the faces in the crowd, students who'd found their calling, instructors who discovered the joy of teaching, families who'd been reunited with loved ones who'd found their way back from despair. After the ceremony, as the sun set over the North Dakota plains, Silas stood with Cormac, Vance, Soren, and Julian in the same configuration they'd stood in that night in 1983. 4 men around a broken machine trying to find a way forward. "Do you ever wonder?" Cormac asked. "What would have happened if that van hadn't broken down? If we'd made it to New York on our own?" Silas considered the question. "I think you would have succeeded anyway. You had the talent, the determination. You would have found a way." "Maybe," Vance said, "but we wouldn't have learned the most important lesson. That success means nothing if you can't share it with the people who made it possible." "The business schools teach you about return on investment," Soren added, "but they don't teach you about the investment of the heart." "That night," Julian said quietly, "when you gave us your last $200, when your brother drove us through a blizzard, when you believed in us when we barely believed in ourselves, that wasn't just kindness. That was the foundation of everything that came after." Silas looked around at the campus they'd built, at the students walking between buildings, at the lights coming on in the dormitories. "I spent 25 years thinking I'd wasted my life. Thinking I was a failure because I never built anything that lasted." "But you did build something that lasted," Cormac said. "You built us, and we built this. And these students will go out and build the future." As they walked back toward the main building, Silas felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Mary died, since the garage was foreclosed, since his life had seemed to collapse around him. He thought about all the nights he'd spent mopping floors and wondering if he mattered, if his life had any meaning beyond simple survival. Now he knew. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is give someone else a chance to succeed. Sometimes the best investment you can make is believing in a dream that isn't even your own. Sometimes the greatest legacy you can leave is the knowledge that kindness matters, that helping others isn't just morally right. It's practically wise. The stars were coming out over North Dakota, the same stars that had shone on a broken-down van and 4 desperate young men 25 years before. But now those stars illuminated not just dreams, but the realization of dreams, not just hope, but hope fulfilled. Silas Thorne, mechanic turned janitor turned educator, finally understood what he'd spent his whole life building. Not just engines or institutions, but bridges between what is and what could be, pathways from desperation to possibility, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of faith can move mountains. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going.